Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for coming back and for checking out this video. I know I've been gone for a while. I've been traveling for about a month now. Attended 2 weddings, did a couple of things along the way. But the good news is I'm back and I've come back bearing gifts. The gift I'm giving to you today is the gift of this video. I'm really excited about it and I'm really excited to show you what it's all about. So I recently came across this new tool called Nhost. I think I tweeted about it as well. That is kind of like the serverless backend alternative for web and mobile applications. It gives you access to things like authorization, authentication, storage. It provides a GraphQL API layer that you can use and communicate with the backend. It gives you things like serverless functions and so on, so many things out of the box. And the free tier is very nice. It's very generous. I'll show you when I get to when I'm signing up for the app, basically. So why this is exciting for me is the same way I felt about scheduled serverless functions is the same way I feel about this tool. I feel like these are tools that are designed specifically to help us front-end engineers get access to skills that ordinarily would not fit within our skill set, right? Things that, for instance, if I'm using Nhost and I'm building an application with it, I can really build a full stack application that has all the backend requirements and all the front end requirements whilst still being a front end engineer, if you get what I mean, right? It doesn't take me too far away from my comfort zone and it gives me the capabilities of writing backend functionality. And I was excited learning it, and I figured it would be exciting to also teach it. So if you find this exciting, please tag along. I'm going to do something really simple. So what I'm going to do is use Nhost and Next.js, build a to-do application. Our to-dos will be stored in a Hasura database using Nhost, and we're going to use GraphQL and Apollo client to communicate, get our data back, authenticate users, make sure that we are connecting users to their personal to-dos, and so on and so forth. And then maybe when we're done, if we're not over time, we can also deploy it so that you know how to deploy these applications when you're done. Enough talk. Let's start building something. So I'll click on go to Nhost. I already have an account. As you can see, I already have a test application that I used to try it out, learn it, play around. So I'm going to create a new application basically, and I will call this Nextjs to do example. I'll leave all the defaults, and yeah, like I was talking about the plan, it's a very generous plan. 1 GB of database space, 5 GB of file storage, 10 GB of network traffic, all on the free plan. So I think that's very generous for someone building like an example app as I am, or just a small application that is not supposed to be enterprise. So setting up Next.js to do example, so this takes 25 seconds. It takes less than that. All right, looks like the application is correctly set up and everything is as good as it's supposed to be. Fantastic. So what we want to do basically, like I mentioned before, is we want to build a to-do application, and to be able to do that with Nhost, we need to switch over to the data tab, and then we can copy our admin secret from here and open Hasura. I think I mentioned it before that Nhost is built on top of Hasura, so we're going to use both Nhost and Hasura to manage the data for this application. So I'll click on this and click on enter, and now I get access to the Hasura GraphQL playground where I can create my my to-dos or whatever tables or database schemas that I want. In this case, I really just want to create a to-dos table where I can store my to-dos. So we can switch over to the data tab and create a new table, and let's call it to-dos. Okay, so we have our to-dos table created right here. So what I want to do is actually go ahead and modify the table and add columns to it. So the first column we want to add is the title of the to-dos. So let's give it a type of text and the default value no. not nullable, not unique. So let's leave that and add another frequently used column. Let's say created at timestamp noun. That is good. Oh, I didn't save the title column. Damn it. Let's do that again. Title of type text and save that. Good. I think we need like an ID, a to-do ID. I think so. Let's do to-do underscore ID, and it's going to be of type UUID. And default, we can take get random, and to-do ID is going to be unique. Yes, that is correct. And save that. Do we need anything else? We need a completed column. This should be a boolean to kind of like help us know when a to-do has been completed or not. So by default it can be false, and save that. Yeah, we have created at title, to-do ID, and completed. So I think that's good enough for now. Let's go ahead and add a primary key because it is required. Save that, and I think that's it. So let's try and insert a row and see if it works. Take a walk. Yeah, I should totally do that. We're using the default value completed. We're using the default value. Yeah, let's save that. And the to-do has been created. So I'll clear this table and add another to-do. Let's say drink water, because we all should drink more water. And insert again. So if I look at the rows, I should now see that I have these two to-dos in my table. Awesome. To visualize that better, let's go back to the API tab, and I'm just going to write a query here, right? And I'm querying the to-dos table, and on that table I want to get back the title and the ID. Yes. So let's run this query, and we see our two to-dos coming through as expected. That is, well, as far as we will go with the backend for now. What I'm going to do is now go back and create our Nextjs application that we are going to use to consume this data. As the need of the application grows, we'll continue to improve the backend. But for now, I think I can go back to my terminal and create a new Nextjs application. So let's do npx create next app, and let's call it nhost example, I guess. Okay, let's make it more explanatory. To do example. So let's get into the nhost to do example directory, and I'm just going to quickly open that up in VS Code. And let's make this full screen. And what I want to do is run the application. Actually, I want to be sure that these are all installed. Yes. Okay, so I can do yarn dev. So start the application. And it's running on localhost 3001. So I think I probably have something else running on 3000. So I will do that again. Okay, now it's working on 3000. So let's go back to the browser and check localhost 3000. And we should see our Nextjs application working as expected. Fantastic. All right, so the next thing I want to do is install a couple of packages and dependencies that would help us facilitate the connection between our nhost application and our Nextjs application. So I will just bring that in to package.json. Copy that, and right here I will paste in the Apollo client package, which will help us facilitate our GraphQL transactions. the Nhost Next.js package, which will help us use Nhost with Next.js, and the React package, the React Apollo package, and then GraphQL. So I'm going to switch this. Oh, dang it, I was doing this in the script section. I'm going to take this out of here and put it right here in the dependencies section. I'm so happy I caught that on time. Something that I've noticed while I was working with the test app I did before is that at the moment the Nextjs Nhost SDK package works better with React 17. So I'm going to switch this to 17.02. It does work with 18, but I ran into a few problems that was easy for me to solve just using 17. I'm sure there's like a PR open to fix that problem on while using React 18 at the moment, but I couldn't wait for it to be fixed before I made this video, so I just rolled back to 17 just to make sure that I don't run into that problem again. So I'm going to save this and stop this application, and then run yarn to install all those other extra dependencies like all of this one. And now that that is done, I'm going to quickly clear this out, and I should probably run the application again so that if there are any errors, I'll see it. So the next thing you want to do is initialize Nhost inside the Nextjs application. So I'm going to go ahead and open underscore app.js, and I'm going to import some things from Nhost. So the first thing I want to import is the Nhost Next provider and the Nhost client package, and this is going to come from the Nhost Next.js package. The next one I want to import is the Nhost Apollo provider. Provider from Nhost React Apollo. Okay, good. And then to initialize Nhost, let's go ahead and create that and say that Nhost is going to be Nhost client. And then what I need to pass into is backend URL. And this will then be the actual backend URL of your Nhost application. So if we go back to Nhost and come to the application we created, it's called the Todo example. Come back to the overview tab, and then you should see your backend URL right here. So I'll copy this and come back to VS Code, and then I'll replace this default URL with the actual Nhost backend URL. All right, so the next thing I want to do is wrap all of this with the Nhost Next provider and the Apollo provider. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll cut this out and then put in the Nhost Next.js provider, and then I'll put the Apollo provider, that is correct, and I will put in the component I cut out before, and then I'm going to end the Apollo provider and end the next provider. That is exactly what I want to do, and I'm very happy that GitHub Copilot is helping out. The next thing I want to do here is pass initial and point that to page props dot nhost session, like this. And with that, we have added Nhost to our Next.js application. And if we check back, we should now see that our app is working exactly as expected and nothing has changed. All right. Well, that step is done. The next thing I want to do is actually make a query to fetch the data that we've created on the API backend, on the GraphQL backend here on Hasura, right? I want to replicate this query from the front end so that I can fetch this data back to my Next.js application, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that in index.js. Get this out of the way. And this looks a little bit dirty at the moment because there's a lot going on. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly get rid of most of these things. And there's a lot going on here. You know what? I think I'm just going to make a new component for that as opposed to doing it directly here. So let's do components, and in there I can have a new file called Todos.js, and here I can export a default component. Well, I'll return something. Let's have a div Todos, and then I can close off that div, save that. Cool. So what I want to do in this component is basically make the API call to fetch the Todos, but I want to create it as a separate component, so all the data that I will need to use and populate this Todos component is going to come from the index.js file. So I think I should probably just get rid of all of this. Cool. I like that. Actually, let me save that and see what it looks like at the moment. That's what I wanted. Okay, so now I just have to use this card to render all of my to-dos. So each to-do I create will appear in this card. So I'm reusing the styling that Next.js has already done for us, which is good. So what I want to do now is create the query to fetch to-dos from our Hasura API backend. In order to do that, I'm going to need to import a couple of things from Apollo client, and the first one is going to be let's import useQuery because we're going to use that. From Apollo client, we are going to use GQL, and we are going to need what else are we going to need for this? I think this is probably all we're going to need for now. I'm not going to need Apollo client. And then to construct that query, it's going to be, let's do const get todos. It's going to be equal to GQL, right? And then as opposed to writing this query, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the one I already have, which is this one. So I'll copy this and paste this here. So basically I want to get all the to-dos, and for each to-do I'm getting the title and the to-do ID, and you know what, let me add the completed column here. And did I specify any other column? Probably did, but this should be good enough. All right, so now that I have this, I'm going to make the call to get the data. I'm going to get the loading state, the error. Okay, this is what I want to do. Fantastic. So what I'm basically doing here is use the useQuery hook to get the GraphQL query that we have defined here, basically, right? So let's log the. As a matter of fact, I want to check for the error state first. So I want to return loading. Yes. If there's an error, then I want to log that error to the console. Otherwise, yeah, let's log the data as well before we decide to show it. Yes. Yeah, that's what I want. So if it's loading, we get loading. If there's an error, we log the error. Otherwise, we get the data and then we log the data. So let's save this and see how that goes. So I'll come back to my application, pull up the console, and see that field todos is not found in query root. And the issue is we don't have the permissions to access the to-dos table on Hasura. So what we're going to do is go back to Hasura and go back to our database and set permissions, right? For now, the admin permission is the only permission that exists, and that is not available to everyone. So I'm going to create a public role, and for that public role, I'm going to set the permissions for it. For the insert permissions, I'm going to do without any checks, and the only columns I want people to insert is the title. The other ones will be added by default. So I'll save this permission, and for the select, I will do the same thing without any checks, and I want them to be able to select all the fields. So I'll save this, and with any luck, that should fix our problem. So if I refresh, now I get to-dos, right? Fantastic. Our to-dos are coming back as expected. Cool. So what I want to do next is set up the todo.js, todos.js component so that it will render all the to-dos that we have. And let me take this from here, and then that's what we're going to have here. And for this, we're going to pass in the loading state, the error state, and the data. All right, so for this, I'm just going to remove the link here, replace that, and for this one, I'm going to do show me the data.title, and for this one, I'm just going to replace this with like something like a description, right? So let's do to do this, right? So I probably should do the error check for here as well. So if loading, if there's an error, log the error, otherwise return this div. Okay, so I'll save this. Here, what I'll then do is I'll check if there's data. Actually, I don't need to do any of these checks here anymore. So what I'll do is check if there's data, and if that is the case, I want to return, oh no, I want to let's say render to-dos, and if that is not the case, let's say no to-dos. All right, so what I want to do is go ahead and import the to-dos component that I created before. So let's do import to-dos from component/to-dos. That is correct. And here I will then go ahead and do to-dos. And for loading, I'm going to pass in loading. For error, I'll pass in error. So I'm passing all the data here. And for this, I'm just going to put a div. No. Yes. Actually, let's use the h2 so that it's easier to see. And it's not going to be loading. It's going to be, let's say there's no data, right? I think that should be it. So let's save this and go back to our Nextjs project. Styles is not defined. Okay, I think that should probably be here. So I'm going to import the CSS styles. So let's import styles from style/home.module.css. Okay, so I'll save that. And with any luck, that should all work as expected. So what is going on? Let's reload this. Okay, I see what's going on. So I will the way that the to-dos are, I think I need to actually, instead of logging it, I can probably check from Hasura to see the structure of the data that we're getting back. So we have data, then inside data we have to-dos, and inside to-dos we have the individual to-dos. And here what we have is data, and that is what we are passing to our todos.js. So here, instead of just doing data.title, we have to do data.todos.title. Actually, since we are going to map over the array of to-dos, I think what we need to do is cut this one out, and then let's do that map function here. So we do data.todos.map. I will accept the help. And then for each data.todos.map, and then for each to-do, we want to return to-do.title, not to-do. We want to-do.title. Close this off here and save that. And then this should map through the array of to-dos and render each individual to-do. So let's save this as well. And then back in our Nextjs project, we now get all our to-dos showing up as expected. Fantastic. All right, we need a key, so let's do that. Here, let's give this a key of todo.id, because that's the good thing about having IDs for individual to-dos. And that should fix the squiggly error for us. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and send a query, a mutation to actually add to-dos to our database, right? If you notice, when we set the permissions, we set the permission for both the insert and the select. So now we are sure that select is working. Let's go ahead and try to insert data. Okay, back inside our index.js file, let's first of all define variables that will hold the value of the to-do title that we want to add to our to-do database. So let's do to-do title, and let's do set to-do title is going to be useState. I don't want to do reactor useState. I think I can directly import useState. From React, and that should work. And then let's create a form just up above the rendered to-dos. Let's create a form. Here we can have an input of type text. The value is going to be to-do title. The value is going to be set to the to-do title we have in state. We're going to have an onChange. And this is going to be equal to the, we're going to directly update the to-do variable we have in state with the event.target.value. And then the next thing we want to do is set a placeholder, of course, enter to-do title. Well, no. Let's just say enter a to-do item. And then what else do I need? I think I do need a class name. So let's give this class name of search. Yeah, now that I've done that, I should probably add that style. Styles home module.css. So let's add that style here. It's going to be input, and I'm going to save that, and then I will change this to be styles.input. And for the form, I should also give this a class name of styles.form. And once again, I'm going to add the form styles. Let's just give it a margin of 16 pixels. Save that, and save this. This should also take an onSubmit for when we submit the form, and let's call it handle submit. All right, so ideally what should happen is when we submit this form, the to-do item, we will set the value of this to-do item and then use a mutation to post it to our Hasura database. So let's save this. Of course, it will error out because we don't have a handle submit. So let's quickly create that. So we'll do const handle submit. It's going to be this, and let's do events.prevent default. Then I will just log something and say form submitted. So I'll save this, and now we have our input, which we will click and see if we get the logs in the console. So form is submitted. Fantastic. All right, so now that we have the form input set up, let's go ahead and create a query for the mutation. So let's do const add to do. That is correct. And then we can write our mutation here. So let's do mutation. And you know what? Let's call it add to do mutation, because I like to name my mutations. And instead of specifying the title as a string, I want to pass it as an object, right? So let's do to do is going to be of type insert to do's, not one input, I just want input, right? And then in here I can do this is correct. I love that. And then I'm going to put in the affected rows right here. Save this, and then I'm going to import useMutation from here. Oh no, not from React, of course, from Apollo client. And I'll import useMutation, and then when this form is submitted, I want to do a couple of things, right? First, I will define the insert to do variable. So I'll do const insert to do is going to be equal to useMutation and pass in the mutation query, which is this. Fantastic. Cool. Now, this is where we do the job of passing this to do, sending this to do off to our database. So let's wrap that in a try and catch. And if there is indeed an error, let's log the error. Otherwise, this. So let's do insert to do and variables, and then inside variables, let me close this off. Inside variables, we will then define our to do object, which will take a title that will be equal to the title that we've set in state, which is this one. Awesome. So insert to do, as a variable, we are passing in a to do object, and inside the object we have the title of the to do that we want to insert into the database. So I used an object because in case we want to pass more things, like we can quickly just add them here, and it's just easier than specifying directly here. Okay, I think this should do it. Right, so what is the next thing I want to do after this? If it succeeds, I want to clear up the yes and remove any to-dos that might be there. So let's save this, and hopefully we have that working for us. Okay, going to write something else here. Let's say actually let's log something as well. Instead of form submitted, let's do and that should not be there, that should be here. And instead of submitted, let's do to do inserted. Good. So if I save this, if this works, then I'll know. So let's do walk the dog. Oh, right, that is bad. Where is it? Insert to dos. So it is to dos insert underscore insert. Save. Hopefully it doesn't yell at me anymore. So let's do walk the dog again and save. And yeah, looks like it worked. So let's refresh. We should now see the new to do show up. And there you go. Queries working, mutation working. Isn't that nice? And to just confirm that it worked, if I run this query again, I should now see the Todo to do show up right here. Awesome. Okay, so the next thing I want to handle is authentication, right? Because of course, if you have a to-do application somewhere, you don't just render everybody's to-do on the homepage, right? You want people to only have access to their own to-dos. So that's what I'm going to do now. We're going to add sign in, sign out, so that people don't see to-dos unless they are authenticated, unless they are signed in. And even then, when they are signed in, they only see their own to-dos, right? So first, let's add authentication. I'm going to add a button to sign in and sign out. Right, so the first thing I want to do is import a couple more things. The first thing I want to import is use authentication. And I'm going to be importing that from Nhost React Apollo. No, I'm importing that from Nhost Next.js. This one. So I will come down to my home component and I will do const, sorry, yes, is authenticated will be this. So I'll save this. And what happens is whenever a user signs in successfully, this value is going to be true. Otherwise it will be false, right? So then under the form, I'm going to add a button. And before that, let's just check that is authentication is in fact true. Then I'm going to add a button. Otherwise, I'm going to add another button, right? So for here, let's do button. And that's the button. That seems okay. And I will say if it's authenticated, so you can sign out. And I'm just going to copy the same button and put it here. So if the user is signed in, we give them a button to sign out. Otherwise, we give them a button to sign in when they are not authenticated, right? So handle submit, no. So let's do handle sign out. And here is going to be sign in for now, although I know that I'm going to come back and okay, so this is how we check whether we're authenticated or not. The next thing I want to do is actually sign in the users or not. So I'm going to come right here and import something else called use email password, because this is how we use the Nhost Nextjs SDK to sign in users. So let's do use sign in email password. Yeah, this one. And the way you use that is we do, for instance, let's do const sign in. I will accept this and remove the use because this is precisely what I want. And set this to be equal to use sign-in email and password. And what I need to do here is specify the email and the password, right? And when we do that, we just need to pass this down. Instead of handle sign-in on the button, we will put this here, and this will, when this button gets clicked, this function will sign in the user with the email and the password that we have provided here, basically. So what about sign out? So let's do that. Let's get the sign out. It's called use sign out, this one, and then I will do exactly the same thing right here. So let's do sign out equal to use sign out, like this. And then let's create the function to sign out the user. So let's do const handle sign out. I think that's what we called it. Handle sign out is going to first, let's see, sign out dot sign out, right? Because sign out, the sign out package, this one is an object, and the function we want to call is the sign out function inside of the object. So we do sign out dot sign out, and here we can log that user is signed out. All right. So I will save this, and let's see what errors we have. Use authentication. Oh no, I know what is wrong. It's not authentication. I think it's use authenticated. I think I imported the wrong thing. Yes, use authenticated. So let's do that here and use authenticated instead, and save that. Okay, that's one error out of the way. Let's try another one. Looks like we're all good. I need to style this button. So I mean, I don't have to, but I like I like things that look okay. So I'm going to create a button style for it. So home module, and just below the form, I will paste in the styles for the button and save that. And with any luck, it should look much better. Prefer that one. Okay. So if we click this button, ideally what should happen is this function should get called to sign in the user with this email and this password. And as of the moment, there is no user in our database, right? We don't have a user yet. So let's go ahead and create a user, and then we can use their email and password to handle the sign-in. So let's go back here and come back to Nhost, switch over to the users tab, and then we can add a user. So I will add myself, and let's do hello@kenny.engineer, and then I will use a very strong password. How strong is that? I'll add this user, and now we have this user in our database. And to be sure, if we come back to our database and go to the auth schema and come all the way down to users, we now see that we have this user created, right? Cool. Okay, so let's come back here and write that email, hello and the password. Strongest password in the world. Of course, if you're building this for production, you'll probably get this detail from an input field and not, like just hard code it. But I mean, I'm just doing this for demonstration. So I'm passing the email directly here and the password as well. So let's save this. And yeah, what I'm going to do is basically look at the button to see if the user was signed in successfully. So what I mean by that is, at the moment, we see the sign in button because the user is not authenticated, right? But if I click it and the user is signed in, then the authentication will become true and this button will now say sign out. So let's try that. And it is not authorized. And that is because by default, unverified users are not allowed to sign in, right? Users with unverified email addresses. So what I can do is come back to this overview tab, switch over to the users tab, go to login settings, and here you should see that we have this checkbox about that says only allow login for verified emails, which is enabled by default. So I'm going to turn that off, and then I'm going to save that changes, and now we should be able to log in without having to verify the email. So I'm going to refresh this, clean up this place. Now if I click sign in, we should now see that the application signs in successfully. If I sign out, we get the user is signed out. So authentication is working now. We are correctly signing users in and out of the application and also tracking their sign-in state. All right. Looks like we are all sorted on that end. The next thing I want to do is to ensure that only signed in users get access to the to-do items that is available on the database, right? Because right now, even if I'm signed out, I still see the to-do items, right? That shouldn't be right. Ideally, what should happen is if you're not signed in, you don't see any to-dos. But if you do sign in, then you see the to-dos. And eventually we will tailor it down so that if you sign in, you see only your own to-dos, the ones that you've created. But in the meantime, let's restrict this the availability of to-dos to only the signed in users. And the way we do that is by using the AuthQuery hook. So instead of using useQuery, we use useAuthQuery. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to import that from React Apollo. So let's do import useAuthQuery, and we're going to import that from Nhost React Apollo. And then instead of using useQuery, let's just use the AuthQuery here, and that should do it. So now if I save this, because I'm signed in, I can't see the to-dos, but if I sign out, now the to-dos disappear and I see no data. Fantastic. So it's as simple as that. Okay, cool. So if we sign in, we see our data. If we sign out, we don't see our data. The next challenge is to track these changes, right? To ensure that when a user signs in, they only have access to their own to-do items. I mean, it wouldn't make sense if I sign in and I see all the to-do items that you've created because you created it for yourself. So to do that, we have to do a couple of things, right? Let's go back to our Hasura console. And the first thing I want to do is let's clear all the existing to-do items. For now, we have about 3, so let's delete this because we're going to add a new column to this table. So I'll come to modify and I'm going to add a new column, and let's call it user_ID, and this will be of type UUID. And yeah, it's not going to have a default value, so let's save this. Cool. And now we want to add a foreign key to our database. So let's say what I'm trying to do here is to connect the to-dos table and the users table. On the to-dos table, I'm trying to connect todo.user_ID, which is the column I just created, to the user.id field in the users table. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to come to the auth reference schema. I will select the users table, and then I will connect the todo.user_ID field to the users.id field on the users table. And I'm going to say cascade, and save. and this seems okay. So I'm going to tell the database to track all of this. Awesome. Okay, looks like that is working. So what I'm going to do now is come back to my Nextjs application and set, oh, actually, no. What I have to do is set permissions, right? Because we currently have a public permission, we will be able to make calls from the front end to the back end, and data will be sent to us because we are using the public permission. But since we are authenticating users, we won't be needing these permissions anymore. So let's get rid of that. Remove all permissions. Okay, and that is gone. And now, when a user is signed in, they automatically have the user role assigned to them. So let's define permissions for the user role, right? For select, for insert, we will check, we'll do a custom check and see that users should only be able to insert columns where the user ID is equal to the X Hasura user ID, which will come from a session variable. Then the only columns you are allowed to affect is the title, because the other ones will all have default values. And I think that's it. Column presets, I want to make sure that the user ID is coming from the session variable and that it is going to be equal to X Hasura user ID. So let's save this. And the insert permission has been set. So let's do the same thing for select. So let's do, you know what? Without any checks is fine, right? Yeah. And then for the column preset, we can select all. And let's save this permission. Now we have the user role. So I think everything is correctly set up as it should be. So let's come back to the application. I'm going to refresh the page and we don't see any to-dos, and that is correct because we deleted all the to-do items we had on our database. So let's try and create new ones. I will do once again, take a walk. Type in take a walk, and I'm going to try and add this, and this to-do is inserted. So if I refresh, I should see take a walk. Let's do that again. I will do walk the dog, and that is inserted. So if I refresh, I should see both of them. Fantastic. And if I sign out, I will see nothing. That is precisely what we wanted. And just to make sure that the sign-in is working as expected and you will not see someone else's to-do items when you sign in, I'm going to create a new user here. So let's add a new user, and I'm going to say this is going to be, you know what, let's just do kenny@me.com, and we are going to have, well, another strong password. This should do it. So I'll add this new user, kenny@me.com, with that password. Then what I will do here is update this to be kenny@me.com. And the password, I could have really used the same thing. Yeah, I think this is what I did. So I will save this. And what I expect to happen is when I sign in, I'm not going to see any to-dos because there's no to-dos belonging to this user, right? So let's do that. Sign in. And the reason why we can see to-dos that belong to other people is because of the select permissions that I've set. So let's come back to user and go to the select. And if you look at this, you see that I don't have any row level permissions set. I'm selecting without any checks. So let's do with the same checks as insert, right? And I'll save this. Permissions are updated. Cool. So if I come back to my application and I refresh, the to-dos will now be gone because I don't have any to-dos belonging to this particular user. So let's give this user one, and let's say watch Netflix, because why not? And this to-do is inserted. So let's save this. We see watch Netflix belonging to this user. So if I sign out, and then I will switch this over to the old user. So let's do Ctrl Z, all of this, and save. I'm going to sign in again. And now I see the to-dos belonging to this particular user. Fantastic. So it looks like it's all working as expected, right? The next thing I want to do is show you how to use protected routes. So imagine that you have a page in your application that you don't want people to access unless they are signed in. You can use protected routes to handle that functionality. So basically, what I'm going to do just to demonstrate it is I'm going to create a fake dashboard page and then protect that route so that only signed in users can access it. So under pages, let's create a new file. Let's call this dashboard.js. Right, and here let's just make a dashboard function, and let's export the dashboard. And here maybe we should just return if that says dashboard. All right, this is all there should be to it. So if I go back to my application and go to /dashboard, I should see this new page, right? So this is all well and good. We can see it now, but we don't want people to see it unless they are authenticated. And then there's the documentation on Nhost about doing that, right? So look at protecting routes, and we are required to create this file and then put in this snippet in it, and then we then wrap the Nextjs page with auth protected to only allow signed in users to access the page. So it looks straightforward enough to me. Let's copy this, and then back in our application we can create that file anyway. I think I can just put auth protected, just like the documentation says, and here we can paste in that file. So what is going on is we're importing use router here basically to use it and reroute the user if they are not authenticated. And we're using the useAuthentication status package from the Nhost Next.js library to check if the user is authenticated. If they are not authenticated, we send them back to, let's make this the home page. If they are not authenticated, we send them back to the home page. Otherwise, we give them access to the page. So let's save this. And then the page, the Nextjs page that we want to protect is the dashboard page, right? So what we need to do is basically import the auth protected function here, and we are importing it from auth protected, right? And what we need to do is basically wrap this dashboard export in the with the auth protected function. So let me cut this out and do auth protected and then pass the dashboard inside, and that should be it. Basically, so let's save this, and with any luck everything should still work as expected. So I see the dashboard route, and that is because I'm currently signed in. So if I sign out and try to access the dashboard again, I'm guessing I will not be able to do that. You see, so it reroutes me back to the home page because I'm not signed in, I'm not authenticated. So let me do that one more time. Go to dashboard, and then it sends me back to the home page. So that is how it works. So if I sign in again and try to go to that route, I should be able to see it now. Awesome. So that is how protecting routes work with Nhost and Next.js. All right. We have queries, we have mutations, we have authentication, and we are connecting, rightly connecting to-dos to individual users. And what else should we do? Let's try deployment, right? What I'm going to try and do is deploy this application to maybe, let's say, Netlify, and see. I haven't deployed like an Nhost application like this before, so I don't know what to expect at this point, but I'm going to try and do that and just let's see what if it works out of the box or if we need to tweak a few things to get it working. So I'm going to stop this and then do you know what, I'm going to create a repository for this on GitHub. So let's call it Nhost Next example and create the repository. Awesome. Now what I'm going to do is git init, git add everything, git commit everything, call it initial commit, and then I can do git remote add origin, and I'll paste in the git origin, and I can do git push and this should work. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go to my Netlify dashboard, and I'm going to try and add a new site from GitHub. And what did I call it again? Nhost Next example. So let's do, I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to type it all out. And Nhost Next example. Select repository, and Netlify is kind enough to detect that this is a Next.js site, so it's going to enable all the necessary things for us. So all I have to do is click on deploy site. Site deploy is in progress, so let's just wait a minute or less for that to happen. And it looks like our site deployed successfully, so I'm going to go ahead and try this. And I see my next application, and let's sign in. Would you look at that? It's all working completely as expected without doing any tweaks. So that is, I think that's amazing. That is fantastic. So yeah, that's it. That's it for this tutorial. If you do anything fun with Nhost, please let me know. I'm really excited about it. Like I said at the beginning, the bulk of my excitement for this tool is the fact that it allows me to build like full stack applications with authentication, with authorization, with database, with serverless functions. You know, all of these things that enriches an application. It gives me the ability to do all of that without really stepping very far away from my front end skills, right? So that's it, and thank you for watching. If you do like this video, please comment, like, subscribe, do all the things that would kind of like encourage me to keep bringing things like this to you all. For now, bye.